The Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Speers.
The Productivity Commission dropped this interim report this week. It got everyone from tech entrepreneurs to best-selling authors really fired up about it.
Yeah, that's because the Commission has essentially thrown a grenade into the debate here by suggesting that we should hit pause on tough AI regulations. On top of that, they've floated the idea of a copyright exemption that would let these AI companies train on Australian creative works without any permission or payment.
Yeah, we wanted to pull this to your attention this week because you might have seen something in the news about it. I find these stories quite easy to gloss over because even though they're front page news or they're leading news bulletins, it's like, I have to sort of stop and think about it. So we're here to exactly give you a few of the concepts around it so you're able to really latch on to this one. We probably should just make the point around what this sort of copyright exemption might be. So normally if you want to use someone's book or piece of music or piece of journalism, you would need permission, and chances are you would have to pay for the use of that. That's what copyright means, essentially. You, or in the case of the news media, your publisher or your broadcaster, you own your work.
But the Productivity Commission is essentially saying that AI companies should get a free pass here. They could take every Australian novel, every news article, feed it all into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and do that without asking anyone or paying a cent for it.
Yeah, and it would mean that those companies could legally scrape that content, use it, teach their AI about how to write like you, how to use your ideas and style, and then that AI could potentially write books that would compete with yours or actually produce what I guess some would call journalism in terms of recreating the news in some sort of way in a particular style, which is why authors are calling it government-sanctioned theft.
You can see why. Many critics say that these tools have already done that. These companies have scraped tons of Australian content, but waving it through and making it legal is another thing. So to what happened this week, on Monday, the Productivity Commission released this report saying that AI could add $116 billion to our economy over the next decade. That's because of efficiency gains. That would be bigger than the impact of the advent of the internet and smartphones 20 years ago.
Yeah, the scale of it really is quite notable, and that's why this is such a contentious one. The Productivity Commission also argues that over-regulation could see Australia fall behind the curve. The fear is that if Australian companies have to negotiate licenses for every bit of content that they want to use to train their AI on, it could really start to see us fall behind before we really get started.
Commissioner Stephen King made this point about existing laws. He said, look, we already have regulations covering fraud and discrimination and all those things. So if an AI does something harmful, then we can prosecute already under those laws. We don't necessarily need another layer specifically for AI.
Yeah, he made this argument too around what's called fair dealing, that using content to train AI is sort of like research or education. Like there's a whole multiple of ways that we already use content, written works, music, all these things that are actually in the environment that are copyrighted. We do that without permission or payment because it's considered to be for the greater good. So, yeah, that's certainly another argument. Plenty of people are saying that it would be, if they did go down this road, a massive stretch when you're talking about trillion-dollar tech companies having access to that material.
Yeah, slightly different to research and education. Our news media companies are up in arms about this. Every investigative report, every exclusive interview they have, every piece of analysis that journalists work really hard on, AI companies could just scrape that without payment.
Yeah, which is particularly galling for news organisations because they're already struggling with declining revenues because of the way tech companies behave and the way that we get our information. Gone are the days of the classifieds in newspapers that essentially paid for their journalism. We're all online now and Googling things. So they continue to invest in journalism. They send reporters to war zones. They send reporters to courts, Jodie, for example,
like
to make sure that we stay.
Yeah,
exactly, to stay informed. Paying for legal protections as well when they expose people for wrongdoing. So that public interest journalism part of it is a very important part of this mix.
Yeah, that's all incredibly expensive. And then an AI company can just come in and hoover up all that expensive journalism and use it to train their models and potentially create AI systems that actually answer news questions without anyone needing to visit the actual news sites.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Of course, news organisations putting up paywalls to, in part, help them stay afloat financially. If AI is scraping this information, you just go to your computer and ask your AI platform what's happening with, and it scrapes all that information and gives you the answer. They're not sending traffic to those sites. So
I know people are already getting around the paywalls by doing that with ChatGPT.
It's a very, very complex and tricky moment that we're in. So that's the journalism end. The creative industries are also livid. Kathy Lett, who's a best-selling author, she pleaded with the government this week saying, don't write off our writers. Most Australian writers earn about $18,500 a year from their writing.
Wow.
I was
Not
really
much, is it?
surprised to see that number. Copyright essentially is how they literally make their living.
So the next question is where the government's at on this. They've been working on mandatory guardrails for AI, basically scoping out the rules to control high-risk AI applications. Former Industry Minister Ed Husic came out this week, aghast at what the Productivity Commission was advocating for here.
Yeah, aghast is one word for it. I saw him on ABC 24 and he was just like, I can't even. He was really beside himself. When it comes to government, though, and its response, the Productivity Roundtable really is probably the next time we'll hear about it. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is already talking about how can we charter some sort of middle course, that there is regulation, but there is some sort of freedom as well for AI technology to boom here in Australia. But people opposed to walking away from regulating AI say that that's really hard. Either AI companies can use your work without permission or they can't. What's the middle way?
Exactly. And on the business side, industry groups say that we can't afford to adopt a wait-and-see approach. The longer this drags on, they say the more it could hurt that $116 billion economic opportunity. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And look, we should just note public trust in AI is already shaky. So there was plenty of commentary this week pointing to surveys that consistently show that Australians think that AI could potentially do more harm than good. So the idea of just abandoning regulation, the critics say, and letting companies just rip through our content probably won't help with that trust issue.
No, it's got everyone talking. Interesting times ahead.